Hello, everyone. This is Rolf from Waves and Positions, and I'm here with a new live broadcast. Pretty exciting. I got over here some shady characters with they're doing a little transaction here. And this is supposed to be Montreal, 1865. And we had a few fun articles that came out over the last week. Just want to go over these fun articles. So you should have received our JFK was assassinated because he threatened Israel's nuclear program. That was part 4 of the Too Big to Fail series. We also had part 2 of the Sovereign Immunity series came out. And that's where we go into the Civil War, how the bankers basically made a ton of money just bankrolling both sides of the war. And then this morning we had a really cool one. This one's about William Colby. He's the CIA director who is pretty much the only CIA director who's cooperated with Congress. Not fully, because we didn't really know who Morales was, the head of operations for Miami, until the investigative journalist kind of did what Julie K. Brown did. So Julie K. Brown, she's the one who blew up the Epstein case. So if you guys don't know, I have an article. Go to her Substack as well. Julie K. Brown is the only reason that we know who Epstein is. Okay. And it's because she just went and found 80 of the victims with these redacted files and things. And that's the only reason we know who Epstein is, because it was completely suppressed by intelligence and the whole government situation. But so coming in part 6, so part 5 came out today. Part 6 is really going to go into David Sanchez Morales, who most people may have not even heard of his name, but he is, anyone who's like a serious JFK researcher knows that he was the head of operations for Miami. So he was like the number 2 person at the largest CIA facility outside of Washington, which is in Miami. And like, we don't have the documents because they've never released these documents. So David Sanchez Morales is what most people think is who planned the whole operation that took out JFK. And the problem is I have another part 7. So part 6 isn't even out yet, but I've already got a part 7. Part 7 is going to go into the whole Roberts Court. So for 73 years, we went from Warren to Rehnquist to Roberts courts, where they're the Chief Justice. So for the last 73 years, we've had this Chief Justice who basically made it almost impossible to get these documents. And that's what's pretty crazy. And John Roberts has made it virtually impossible. So when Donald Trump says we're releasing the documents, these are the documents that were set aside to be released. But the ones we need were never even put into that pile. So you have to realize that. So I'll put a list of all the stuff we need, which has never been released, which would really be what would teach us. But so the reason we even know who David Sanchez Morales is, because William Colby never gave us an org chart of, he gave us a lot of information, the family jewels, but we didn't get an org chart. So we luckily have this guy named Gayton Fonzie. He's a reporter who in Miami, kind of like Julie K. Brown in Miami. So this guy tracked down all the low level people that worked in the CIA, the janitors and every person he could find, and figured out that Morales was the head of operations, because no one would tell you. And then when you go to look who Morales is with the CIA, his entire file is redacted from February 1963. There's just no information after 1963, February 1963. They don't want you to know anything that he was doing. and they've never released that stuff. So, but yeah, he went around and he figured out that it was Morales. You're gonna find this out in part 6. I'm kind of giving a preview. So he contacted Morales and had him get ready to come testify. And of course, he died of a heart attack like a few weeks before he was supposed to be telling people about what he was up to during his time with the CIA. But anyways, I'm just going to bounce around here. We do have some updates from the Iran war. His guest is back on. And I mean, what people don't, we're just so bombarded with so much information. We don't quite understand that Iran is a sovereign nation that's a member of the UN. And for us to go attack them, we need a declaration of war from Congress. Like this isn't like the war on terror where there's this stateless group that we can go bomb somewhere. Even that is very suspect. You know, we need Congress to be monitoring what is going on. But we've already gone way past this. I think there was a 60-day limit where you have to let Congress know, and Congress has to authorize things beyond 60 days. So again, we're bombing today, and it's not really being reported because real supply and demand numbers are so off. Like I wrote a whole series called Decoupled. You guys haven't read it. Anyone who subscribes, you guys probably noticed that I try to make as much free information, like most of the information that's really important, I just put for free. And then I have a lot of other extra information for people that want to pay the $8, per month to see extra information. So I have a decoupled series where the first article is like pretty much all the information. Then I have 3 other parts that go into real detail about how during COVID, a barrel of oil went to negative $37. And after that, the oil producers were like, we're not going to let that ever happen again. So they pretty much just fixed the market, like took over the market. It still has the same charts and colors, but it's totally fixed. And what is crazy is like we had the greatest disruption of oil ever. And that oil only went up like $30 or something. It's pretty amazing. I mean, the powers that be know that, other countries that are most of their population is like on the edge. I mean, even in America, a lot of people are just paycheck to paycheck. You double the price of fuel, it's like instant revolution. So I'm sure that's part of the reason they've been artificially keeping the price of oil down, because they don't want worldwide revolution. But I mean, all reports are that stocks, I mean, all the petroleum storage facilities are very low because they're just trying to keep up with this fake number. And what's going to happen is sometime pretty soon, because the Strait of Hormuz is, all we know, it's closed again, or if it was even ever open fully. At some point, supply and demand is going to come crashing right back together, because it's pretty funny right now. But anyways, if you check out the Decoupled series, I wrote that a couple months ago. It just goes into how they took over the price of oil, how everything changed during COVID. So this week, I want to go back to part 4. So part 4 came out really good of the too big to fail thing. So it goes into sort of why November 1963? Why take out Kennedy in November of 1963? Why not wait till after the election or another time? And so what part 4 really goes into is this critical stage in the plutonium breeder facility that Israel had. And it's just so logical, like kind of what happened. So in 1956, Israel, Britain, and France kind of got together and said, oh, okay, we want to retake the Suez Canal, because, whoever owns the Suez Canal is going to charge a fee or whatever to conduct commerce through that waterway. So Israel, Britain, and France were like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to take it over. And I guess Dwight D. Eisenhower wasn't on board with that. So he called up France, Britain, and Israel and said, sorry. And so they all backed down and gave it back to Egypt. And Israel realized that if they didn't have a nuclear weapon, the US could just basically at any time just say, we're just going to cut you off if you guys don't do what we want. So they went into a secret negotiation with France, because the US pissed off France, Britain, and Israel. So without telling the US, the France built a nuclear facility in Israel. Okay, without telling the US. Okay. And the US is just like trying to not have other countries have nuclear weapons, right? You know, uh, with more countries with nuclear weapons, there's more of a chance of one getting stolen or one getting dropped for somebody who's messing up for some reason. And a lot of countries may not have the safety protocols that the US or Russia have. So the US policy is trying to non-proliferate. So France had an election, and then Charles de Gaulle came back into power, and they were having so many problems with the Arabs in their colonies, their former colonies, that they're like, you know what, we're just going to flip to be pro-Arab. And Charles de Gaulle just wasn't even aware that this nuclear facility he was being built by France and was literally for a nuclear weapon. He got really pissed off and was like, you need to just terminate all of this. They'd already sent the plutonium separator facility, which is for the bomb or whatever. And de Gaulle was like, you need to just like declare the reactors peaceful and just open inspections and just stop what you're doing right now. Of course, they were not into that. So that's when France pulled out of that whole thing. And that's when James Angleton was like, oh, Israel needs help. So he swooped in and basically co-ran the Israeli intelligence, and he kind of had this monopoly on that intelligence. And so later, so this all happened during Eisenhower time, and Kennedy just inherited a bunch of stuff from somebody wrote economy will collapse. I don't know. I mean, I think the powers that be do not want the economy to collapse, so they're going to try as hard as they can. But it's the fact that the oil stocks are so low. When I say stocks, I mean the reserves, and that we didn't have fertilizer this spring. Like 30% of the world's fertilizer comes out of the Persian Gulf, and it's not the most popular series because for the same reason it's not in the news. I wrote a whole thing about the fertilizer apocalypse. It's not my most popular article, but it's like without fuel, you just have to walk some more. Without food, you don't survive. So it's kind of like people are so thinking about fertilizer right now, but it's probably more important than fuel because we need food to survive, right? Of course, we need fuel to ship all the food everywhere. But so Kennedy sent this letter to, he inherited all this stuff from Eisenhower. And so he sent this letter to the prime minister of Israel saying, hey, we need to do some inspections. And so he kind of did this delay. Sure, we'll do inspections in January 64 or something like that. And they were just really close to getting this reactor going. So Kennedy's taken out, and just a few years later, Israel has a nuclear weapon. And so what happened was the next time, like Eisenhower in 1956, in 1973, there was a surprise attack, the Yom Kippur War, where Egypt attacked on their on Israel's most holy day is Yom Kippur, and just routed, like everybody was like taking a vacation. So Israel just got routed. And Kissinger was like, "Oh, I can use this as a bargaining chip or something." So he kind of told Israel, "Well, if you guys don't do this, then we're not going to do this." And Israel was like, "Oh, really?" So if you make it down to the bottom of my part 4, I got a picture of these French Mirage fighter jets being loaded with nuclear bomb, like nuclear devices, basically. And so the prime minister at the time put those out there on the airfield for the U.S. satellites or U-2 spy planes to see. And they're like, "Well, you aren't going to help us, then we're just going to have to nuke them." And so I guess having that ability to start World War III, because I mean, if you nuke Egypt, is Russia what's gonna happen after that? So Kissinger just folded. So basically that's what they bought by taking out Kennedy and then getting a nuclear weapon. They no longer had this threat of cutting us off, because this is what happened. So in 1973, here's our nuclear bomb. We're gonna nuke them. Kissinger was like, "Nope, no, don't do that. Don't do that." So they went and took all of our equipment that was supposed to fight the Soviets out of Germany, and for 32 days just flew in all of our equipment, tanks, everything, everything into Israel, and we were just almost like bare cupboards if the Soviets decided to invade, and just sent everything down there to help Israel so they wouldn't nuke the Egyptians. So, I think part 4 is pretty interesting. You guys get to see another reason why, and so just so you guys know, like what I'm really getting at here now is that the whole Operation Mongoose, which was to kill Castro, this was authorized by Kennedy and ran by RFK. So when you connect the dots, this program that killed Kennedy and RFK was a program they created. So JFK authorized Operation Mongoose that then RFK was in charge of, which was by any means necessary kill Castro. This is uh, after the Bay of Pigs, but before the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so RFK was just like every day, like, "What have you guys done? What have you guys done?" He was just like whipping people, like, "Why isn't Castro dead yet?" And so they were just throwing as much money as possible to these guys, like, "Get it done, get it done." And they created the most massive government program to remove a head of state and install the after day. Day after. So most people don't think about this, but winning a battle or a war is the easy part. Okay. Like, think about Iraq. We won the war. George Bush was on a aircraft carrier. We won, right? After like 2 days. The hardest part is the day after. The day after you win, the day after you're elected, the day after you get the job, like you got the job. Now you got to do the job. So we created this system where we could remove a head of state and install the day after structure to make everything even keep going. We got the best in the world with the most money, and we did it to lots of countries, and then we did it to ourselves. So it's the most insane blowback you can think of, is that Kennedy created this behemoth system that was just went out of control, out of oversight, because they tried to shut it down. They thought it was shut down. They didn't know that the money was flowing and it was still getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so we went over part 4. So let me go over part 5, then I'll go into part 2. I'll go over part 5 real quick here. So part 5 is just really cool. And I don't know what happened with the emails. Like something was weird with the email, where I have another email account where I get an email from myself and the pictures were all weird in different places. But if you just click on the actual link to part 5, Too Big to Fail, it's the man who killed the deep state and was killed for it. This goes into William Colby, who's this badass James Bond guy, man. I mean, you just see what he did in World War II. He was like the dude that goes behind enemy lines and leads the commandos to take over beat the Nazis. I mean, this guy's like special. I mean, this is what J. Edgar Hoover, he talked about what the FBI was. He wanted linebackers with PhDs. That's what the FBI is supposed to be. But this is kind of the same thing. We got him. He went to law school, and after all his World War II stuff, and then joined the CIA. After he was part of this, precursor to Delta Force or precursor to SEAL teams or whatever. But what happened was, okay, this is really cool. So part 5 is the downfall. So Nixon was like, we got to get rid of Hoover and Angleton. This is too crazy. These guys are running the country and I'm just sitting around here. So luckily Hoover died, because a couple times Nixon brought Hoover into the Oval Office to fire him and chickened out. And then Hoover died. So then it was like the problem was solved. So now you just have Angleton left. So he got Colby in there. Well, first he put in his buddy that was a defense admiral, Schlesinger. So Schlesinger went in there. He compiled the family jewels thing, but then Nixon moved Schlesinger to Department of Defense and brought in Colby to run the CIA. And so Colby ends up disclosing the family jewels and shows this gun, the gun that shoots ice crystals that just melt. Like after it does the damage, it just melts and it's like, what? It wasn't us. Where's the bullet? Because the ice just melts, right? And I don't know if you guys have read this. There's a Dan Brown, the guy who wrote the Da Vinci Code. He's got another book called Deception Point, where like the special forces guys, he claims these are real. This is real. That the special forces guys have these weapons where you just jam snow in the bottom and it creates ice bullets. Or if you're in the desert, you just jam sand in the bottom and it melts the sand into glass BBs. So you just like have unlimited ammo. It's just probably how much battery pack you have. And this is like a real weapon that they use now. So it's probably this thing from 1975 was sort of a precursor to these weapons we've never seen on the market, where you just jam stuff from the environment in and it creates it sounds science fiction, right? But they brought one in 1975, which is like 52 years ago, 51 years ago. I'm sure they've come up with something better since then. So anyways, Colby gets fired immediately. Because Colby he was like, you know what? They're probably just going to completely dismantle the CIA anyway. We might as well just tell it what happened and maybe that'll keep us around. So Ford was like, no. Fired Colby immediately, brought in our buddy George H.W. Bush. And the reason they picked George H.W. Bush, because by all appearances, had never been in the CIA, never gone near any of that stuff. So he's the perfect guy to become the head of the CIA because he's never been in the CIA before, right? So then later we know that he's probably been in the CIA his whole adult life. Anyways, so we're going to have a part 6 coming out. Oh, sorry, I forgot. So Colby, so in 1996, that was the peak year for after the 1992 JFK Act, where they're like, the JFK movie came out and they're like, oh yeah, JFK. Yeah, that was probably a conspiracy. Let's look into it. So in 1996, this was like the peak time when they were trying to gather all the documents. Colby was still alive and he was set to go testify. Like he was like, dude, I'm ready to tell everybody what's going on. He just drowns right before he's supposed to talk. He's 76 years old, but nobody really knows what happened exactly. And it's very similar to the next part. So the next part 6 that's coming out is how Morales in 1978, he's the head operations person for Miami. So we don't have documents because those documents were not part of what's released. And part 7 in this series, I'm going to go through all the Roberts court decisions that were specifically done so that you can't sue. Like if you sue the CIA, they can just be like, we don't want to. Like there's nothing you can do. Like no Freedom of Information Act. So what would have to happen is eventually whenever Roberts passes away or is impeached, I don't know, we'd get a chief justice in there and a different ideological court would have to change those laws. Or, I mean, Congress would check the judicial by making a new law, but Congress is very hard to get anything passed. So anyways, we're going to move on to this probably may have upset this probably changes some people's references of mine. My part 2 of the Sovereign Immunity series. This goes into how Abraham Lincoln, it looks like he was taken out by the bankers. I mean, he only was the most powerful man on earth for 5 days before they took him out. So Lee surrenders. The Confederacy is over. Grant has a 1 million man army with the best equipment you could possibly get in 1965. 1 million men. I mean, he was set to create a whole new financial system. Like you got a 1 million men army. It's like Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon. There's nobody stopping you. Nobody's stopping you, man. And so he had 5 days where he was it's just lessons to be learned. When you win a battle like that, you better have security the day after you win the battle. Right when Grant went for the surrender with Lee, I mean, there should have been like a commando force around Lincoln, making sure he didn't get taken out. It's just too bad that they didn't. It didn't happen. But this whole article just goes into how all the bankers were betting on the Civil War, and they made a bunch of money, and a lot of the investors lost tons of money. But the people who created the structured the investments made tons of money. So some of the French bankers did this $15 million bond for the Confederacy. And anytime there was a Confederacy win, the bonds on the London Exchange would go crazy up like a cryptocurrency, like up. And then they'd lose the battle, it'd go down, up, down, up, down. So it was just like gambling. And then when the Confederacy surrendered, those bonds went to zero because the value of the bond was when there was a stalemate and they negotiated. Whenever the Civil War was going to be over, the Confederate government would then pay in cotton those bonds. So if you held a bond, then it would get paid off by the future cotton. But of course, when the Confederacy no longer exists, no one's paying the cotton to those bonds. So people holding those bonds lost their shirt. So it's really interesting that I never knew this, but the Rothschilds' their main person in America was the head of the Democratic Party, which was the South, right? And you can't really compare the parties now to then. I mean, the people now like to compare the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. So traditionally, the Democratic Party was always this billionaire class from the South. And so it's kind of reversed now where the billionaires are the Republicans. But at this time, the head of the Democratic Party was the main contact with the Rothschilds. And apparently, like, the Rothschilds always supported the North, the Union, because they have this huge network of spies. The reason the Rothschilds were always ahead of everyone is because they have this amazing network of spies that they just get information before anyone else. Like, information is king. Okay. Whoever has the information first wins, right? So the Rothschilds would know about Union battle victories before Washington knew, before Washington, D.C. Like, they knew everything. So they they were supporting the Union and um, betting on the Union, where other people were betting on the Confederacy. Like they already knew what was going on when other people were getting other kinds of information. So who knows? I mean, Lincoln would have been an existential threat to anybody, even the ones supporting, like the Rothschilds supporting, or another group supporting the Confederacy. Lincoln just being the most powerful person on earth with 1 million-man army. And what other stuff we don't learn in school is that England sent a ton of soldiers, like 15,000 soldiers to BNA, British North America, which is Canada now. And France took advantage of the Civil War and went in and took over Mexico. So one thing that did happen right after the Civil War is we sent 50,000 troops to Mexico to be like, bro, France, get out of here. Sorry. And France was like, okay, sorry. We didn't mean to mess up the Monroe Doctrine. So like right after the Civil War, we were on it. We were down in Mexico, just getting France out of there. Because France gave up the Louisiana Purchase because Napoleon always expected to get it back. Okay. We got it for really cheap because he just needed some cash to run his armies in Europe, but he always expected to get it back. And so that was this Napoleon III came down, took over Mexico City, and had like 38,000 men or whatever. And so, yeah. So so I actually a whole section in this part 2 is about the 2 foreign armies on American soil. We have France and Mexico and Britain and Canada. And then here's something else most people don't know about is a huge portion of the Union Army were Irish. And so they were really pushing to take over British North America to force England to let Ireland become independent. So that was another reason to take out Lincoln. That was a major movement was to go take over British North America. Sure, you can have them back. Just let Ireland become independent. And of course, so this picture right here, this is supposed to be John Wilkes Booth in Montreal with doing some funny business here. So if you look into John Wilkes Booth, we're supposed to believe he's like a Lee Harvey Oswald, this fanatical guy who had passion and just killed Lincoln. But if you start to look, well, the Lee Harvey Oswald stuff that I've looked at is he was just totally a construct to be the fall guy because he'd been to the Soviet Union. He'd done all these things. He was pro-Cuba. He was a Marxist, and they wanted to blame him. So I don't even know if he took a shot. Like that seems like he didn't take a shot. But John Wilkes Booth had all his money up in these banks in Montreal, and there was a whole Confederate Secret Service. And then the head of money for the Confederacy, the Secretary of State of the Confederacy, he ended up just getting a huge promotion and working for the British Crown, living in England the rest of his life. And he burned all his papers so no one could ever see what was really going on. So I have another article that's going to be coming sometime soon. I don't know when, but it's really interesting on William of Orange. Now, people don't really, we always watch all these movies about Queen Elizabeth I and all the Elizabeths and King Henry VIII and stuff. And like most people don't know that the current British system is from the invasion of William of Orange. So William of Orange invaded England with an armada that was 4 times the size of the Spanish Armada. Like you've never heard this before. So an armada, you heard about the Spanish Armada hit some bad weather and Queen Elizabeth, blah, blah, blah. They never tell you about William of Orange, who had 4 times the ships with 4,000 cavalry, landed in England and took over. Okay. And this is the current system in England. So Queen Elizabeth, all that wiped out. All those lines wiped out. William of Orange came in and took over England. That's the last time England was invaded and taken over. And that was in 1688. So that's the current system in England, is the William of Orange invasion, where they took over England with 4 times the Spanish Armada. Okay. And that's where they created the Bank of England. So the Bank of England and everything comes from William of Orange's system, where they basically just took out the monarchy, right? So that was the big thing, was they just basically took out the monarchy and created this whole system where the banks control what's going on. And the average English person, you talk them down the street, talk to them about down the street, they probably don't know that this story. So I've got another article coming soon about that. Maybe it'll be in part 3 of this, part 3 of the sovereign immunity thing is going to deal with the 2008 crisis, because most people have no idea that it was the European banks. So we think it was greedy Wall Street bankers, and we got a $787 billion bailout, but it wasn't. The whole 2008 crisis was because European banks, it had to do with the euro dollar. So oil, we went off the gold standard because now dollars are backed by oil, right? Because no one can buy oil except with dollars. So every country has to have dollars. And so the way the European banks do it is they buy US AAA securities, and then they just create dollars out of thin air that are not controlled by the Fed, US Fed. So these are dollars that are just imaginary IOU dollars. And what happened was, when the housing crisis occurred, that was the AAA securities they had that were backing their euro dollars. So we had some pain over here, but they were like systemic monetary crisis on their side. So what happened was, our Fed ended up giving like 10 or 16 trillion dollars. And our Fed is now the lender of last resort for those European banks. Okay. I'll say that again. We're the lender of last resort for the European banks. So I don't know if it was the US just trying to take over those European banks, or that was just merging all the banking systems together, because it's basically I've got the little hierarchy picture. Here, let me see if I can switch over to it real quick here. I've never done this before we're almost done here, but I'm just going to switch over to my little, okay, I got to sit over here a little bit. So this picture is in part 1 of the sovereign immunity series. So we got the it's not coming in fully here. Sorry, it goes off the page here, guys, but we got the Bank of International Settlements up here, the Fed, all the other Federal Reserves, then the retail banks, and check out the part 1. You get to see that whole picture there. So I'm going to go back to our friend John Wilkes Booth. But hey, thank you guys all, for anyone who stuck around here. And thanks for all the support. I mean, you guys, it's amazing. I have a few other videos I made. The reason this video seems like I haven't done one in a while is because I did 2 other videos with another guy, with Emmanuel and Spencer. We kind of joined and made a little podcast. So look for that. I'll post it. I'll post it in my notes here. We have 2 videos already where we just kind of discuss world stuff going on in the world. And I will be back with another live video soon. This is Rolf from Waves and Positions. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.